When Clara married Ethan, people called them the perfect couple. Beautiful house, beautiful future, beautiful love. And honestly, for many years, it was true. Ethan adored Clara deeply. He kissed her forehead every morning before work, bought flowers for no reason, took photos of her constantly like man terrified of forgetting beauty. Meanwhile, Clara loved him quietly but completely. Warm dinners waiting every evening, long late-night conversations, dreams about future children, simple, happy life. Then, one terrible night, everything changed forever. Heavy rain covered the highway. Clara drove home after a charity event downtown. Meanwhile, a drunk truck driver lost control nearby. Bright headlights suddenly appeared, loud crash, screaming metal. Then, darkness. Hours later, Ethan rushed desperately toward hospital emergency room after receiving the phone call, hands shaking violently, heart pounding uncontrollably. And when doctors finally walked outside surgery, their faces already carried bad news. She survived. Tiny relief. Then came the devastating part. Severe burns across the left side of her face. Ethan immediately froze emotionally, because suddenly, the future he once imagined disappeared beneath one sentence. Weeks passed afterward. Painful surgeries, bandages, endless medicine. Meanwhile, Clara slowly realized something terrifying too. Ethan stopped looking directly at her. At first, she convinced herself it was shock, trauma, fear. But slowly, distance entered the marriage quietly. Conversations shorter, touches rarer, silences heavier. One evening, after finally removing facial bandages completely for first major recovery stage, Clara stood nervously before the bedroom mirror. Burn scars visible now, skin uneven, one eye slightly damaged, and for the first time she truly saw how different she looked. Tears immediately filled her eyes, because deep down she already feared the truth. Beauty once built part of her identity, too. Moments later, Ethan entered the room unexpectedly, then instantly stopped seeing her reflection. For several painful seconds, he said nothing, only stared silently. And honestly, that silence hurt Clara more than screaming ever could. Finally, Ethan quietly looked away, then whispered weakly, "I'm sorry." The sentence shattered Clara completely, because suddenly she understood something horrifying. Her husband was apologizing for no longer being able to see her the same way. That night, Clara cried silently inside the bathroom for hours. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone downstairs, drowning in guilt, because deep down, he hated himself, not for Clara's scars, for his own weakness, for the fact he genuinely struggled looking past them, and somehow that truth made him feel monstrous. Weeks later, distance became unbearable. Ethan stayed longer at work, avoided intimacy completely, barely touched Clara anymore. Meanwhile, Clara slowly stopped looking into mirrors entirely. One cold evening, during dinner filled with painful silence, Clara finally asked the question haunting both of them. "Do you still love me?" Ethan immediately froze, because deep down he did love her, but love now carried guilt, fear, and emotional confusion too. Long silence followed. Then weakly, Ethan answered, "I don't know how to be the same anymore." The sentence completely broke Clara's heart, because suddenly she realized the cruelest truth of all. The accident didn't only burn her face, it burned their marriage too. After the accident, the house slowly became emotionally unbearable, not because Clara complained, not because she became angry. Honestly, that almost made everything worse. She still cooked dinner every evening, still folded Ethan's clothes carefully, still whispered good night softly before sleep, even while carrying unbearable pain inside herself. And every act of kindness only increased Ethan's guilt further, because deep down, he knew Clara deserved stronger love than what he was giving her now. Meanwhile, Clara quietly stopped going outside often. People stared too much. Children sometimes became frightened unexpectedly, and strangers tried too hard pretending not to notice the scars. So eventually, home became safer than the world. But sadly, even home no longer felt safe emotionally either. One evening, Ethan stayed late at work again, not because work required it, because returning home filled him with shame. That night, his company hosted important business dinner downtown, bright lights, elegant people, forced smiles, and while standing alone near the balcony trying to breathe through his emotional exhaustion, someone suddenly approached him. Sophia Bennett, new marketing director, beautiful, confident, perfect makeup, perfect smile. The kind of woman Ethan once naturally noticed before guilt complicated attraction itself. At first, their conversation remained harmless. Work topics, business jokes, small talk. But strangely, for the first time in months, Ethan felt normal around someone. No hospitals, no scars, no emotional heaviness crushing every conversation. And honestly, that feeling terrified him. Meanwhile, Sophia quickly noticed Ethan's sadness beneath polite professionalism. "You look exhausted." Tiny sentence, but somehow it almost broke him emotionally, because nobody asked how he felt since Clara's accident. Everyone focused on Clara surviving, rightfully, but Ethan quietly drowned too, inside guilt, inside confusion, inside self-hatred for struggling emotionally afterward. That night, after too many drinks, Ethan unexpectedly confessed part of the truth to Sophia. "My wife had an accident." Sophia's expression softened instantly. "I'm sorry." Ethan stared silently at city lights, then weakly whispered, "She survived." But everything changed. For several seconds, Sophia said nothing, only listened. And somehow, that simple listening felt dangerous emotionally, because lonely people become vulnerable to comfort very quickly. Weeks passed afterward, and slowly, Ethan began staying near Sophia more often. Long lunches, late meetings, extra conversations after work. Nothing physical yet, but emotionally, distance from Clara grew larger every day. Meanwhile, Clara noticed everything silently: the longer work hours, hidden phone screen, the way Ethan smiled at messages he never shared anymore. And deep down, a terrifying suspicion slowly entered her heart. One rainy night, while Ethan showered upstairs, his phone suddenly vibrated repeatedly on the kitchen counter. Clara never checked his phone before, not once during marriage. But loneliness changes people too. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she looked down at the screen. Sophia, heart. Just seeing the heart emoji already shattered something inside her chest. Then another message appeared. "I miss your smile today." Clara immediately felt unable to breathe, because suddenly everything became painfully clear. Her husband wasn't only emotionally distant anymore, he was emotionally leaving her completely. Moments later, Ethan walked downstairs casually drying his hair, then instantly froze seeing Clara holding the phone silently. The room became terrifyingly quiet. rain touching windows softly outside, and for several painful seconds, neither spoke. Finally, through trembling breath, Clara whispered the question destroying both of them. "Is it because of my face?" Ethan immediately looked devastated, because deep down, he knew the horrifying answer wasn't simple. No, he didn't stop loving Clara only because of scars, but the accident changed attraction, changed intimacy, changed the emotional balance between them completely. And somehow, that truth felt too cruel to speak aloud honestly. Tears rolled down Clara's face quietly now, because Ethan's silence already answered enough. Then suddenly, she whispered something heartbreaking. "I survived the crash, but I still lost my husband." That sentence completely destroyed Ethan emotionally, because deep down, he realized something terrifying. Clara didn't only need medical healing after the accident, she needed love strong enough to survive physical change too, and he failed her exactly when she needed him most. After reading Sophia's message, something inside Clara quietly died. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silently, like final candle finally losing flame after struggling too long. Meanwhile, Ethan stood frozen across the kitchen, unable to explain himself properly, because honestly, there was no explanation clean enough anymore. Not after months of emotional distance, not after secretly searching comfort inside another woman while his wife rebuilt herself from tragedy. Clara slowly placed the phone back onto the table carefully, hands strangely calm now. And somehow, that calmness terrified Ethan more than anger ever could. Because tears can sometimes be repaired, but emotional emptiness often cannot. Finally, through quiet, exhausted voice, Clara asks softly, "Did you ever look at me after the accident and wish I hadn't survived?" The question physically shattered Ethan. No. Immediate answer. Desperate answer. Real horror filled his face instantly. Because despite everything, he never wanted Clara dead, not even for 1 second. But Clara's eyes already carried unbearable sadness now. Then, softly, she whispered the sentence destroying him completely. "You looked at me like life became harder after I lived." Silence crushed the kitchen, because deep down, Ethan feared that truth already. Not because he stopped caring, because trauma changed him into someone weaker than he imagined himself capable of becoming. That night, Clara didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't beg him to stay. Instead, she quietly walked upstairs alone, opened the closet slowly, and began packing. Simple movements, calm movements. Meanwhile, Ethan sat downstairs, unable to move, listening to drawers opening upstairs, suitcase wheels moving softly. And suddenly, he realized something terrifying. His wife was leaving him before he fully abandoned her himself. Moments later, Clara walked downstairs carrying one suitcase only. No makeup, no dramatic speech, only scars and dignity. Ethan immediately stood up, panicking. "Clara, please." But Clara softly stopped him, then quietly whispered, "I already survived one disaster this year." Long pause. "I won't survive living where I'm no longer loved completely." Tears instantly filled Ethan's eyes, because suddenly he understood something devastating. Clara wasn't leaving because she hated him. She was leaving because staying would slowly destroy what remained of her self-worth. Outside, rain fell softly again, just like the night of the accident, and somehow, life cruelly felt like circle repeating itself. Ethan stepped closer desperately now. "I'm confused. I'm broken too." Clara nodded slowly. "I know." Tiny, sad smile appeared briefly. "And I spent months excusing your distance because I knew you were hurting." Her eyes filled with tears finally. But pain doesn't give people permission to emotionally abandon someone already fighting to survive. Those words hit Ethan harder than betrayal accusations ever could, because deep down, he knew she was right. Clara slowly reached for wedding ring afterward, hands trembling slightly now for first time all night, because despite everything, she still loved him. That was the tragedy. She loved a man who no longer knew how to love her back correctly. Then, quietly, she placed the ring into Ethan's hand and whispered the sentence haunting him forever afterward. "You were supposed to help me feel beautiful again, not remind me why I stopped feeling that way." Ethan immediately broke down crying, real, uncontrollable crying, because suddenly he realized the full cruelty of what happened. The woman who once trusted him most now felt unwanted inside her own marriage. Meanwhile, Clara picked up her suitcase calmly again, then walked toward the front door. No screaming, no revenge, only heartbreak too exhausted to fight anymore. Before leaving, she stopped briefly without turning around, then softly whispered, "I hope one day you become strong enough to love people after life changes them." Moments later, the front door quietly closed behind her, and Ethan remained alone inside the silent house, holding wedding ring tightly while rain touched the window softly outside. Because suddenly, the scars he feared looking at were no longer inside Clara's face. They were inside himself. After leaving Ethan, Clara rented a tiny apartment across the city. One bedroom, old wooden floors, leaking kitchen sink, thin walls carrying strangers' voices at night. Nothing like the beautiful home she once shared with her husband. But strangely, for the first time since the accident, she could finally breathe without feeling unwanted. Still, starting over alone terrified her, because every morning the mirror still waited, and no matter how hard Clara tried acting strong, seeing the scars remained painful. Some days, she touched the damaged side of her face gently, wondering whether she would ever feel beautiful again. Other days, she avoided mirrors completely. Meanwhile, the world outside didn't make healing easier. People stared. Children sometimes looked frightened accidentally. Strangers quickly looked away, pretending politeness. And every tiny reaction slowly reopened wounds inside Clara's heart. One afternoon, while grocery shopping, a little girl innocently asked her mother loudly, "Mommy, what happened to her face?" The mother immediately looked embarrassed, but Clara only smiled weakly, pretending it didn't hurt, then quietly finished shopping before crying alone inside her car afterward, because deep down, she still mourned the woman she used to be, not only physically, emotionally too. Meanwhile, Ethan's guilt consumed him daily. The empty house became unbearable now. Clara's favorite books still near the couch, her coffee mug beside the sink, tiny reminders everywhere. And suddenly, Sophia no longer felt exciting anymore, because now Ethan understood something horrifying. He didn't lose Clara the night she left. He lost her little by little every time he failed, making her feel loved after the accident. Meanwhile, Clara slowly buried herself inside work completely. Long hospital shifts, extra overtime, exhaustion became easier than loneliness. Then, one evening, everything unexpectedly changed. A famous fashion company organized charity gala inside the hospital for burn survivors. Successful people everywhere, doctors, designers, media photographers, and Clara immediately felt uncomfortable attending because elegant events now reminded her painfully of everything she no longer looked like. Still, hospital director insisted she come because of her incredible work helping patients. So, reluctantly, Clara attended wearing a simple black dress and light makeup, carefully hiding parts of her scars. Throughout the event, she stayed mostly quiet near the back, avoiding cameras, avoiding attention, until suddenly, someone approached her calmly. Alexander Reed, world-famous fashion designer. Tall, elegant, sharp gray suit, and unexpectedly kind eyes. Clara instantly recognized him from magazines, but before she could become nervous, Alexander softly smiled, then quietly said something no one told her in months. "You look beautiful tonight." Clara froze completely, because after the accident, people usually complimented her strength, her bravery, never beauty, and somehow that difference emotionally destroyed her. Clara awkwardly looked away. "You don't have to say that." Alexander's expression softened slightly, then calmly answered, "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it." Silence followed afterward, because suddenly, for the first time since Ethan stopped looking at her lovingly, someone looked directly at her scars without discomfort, without pity, without fear, only honesty. Meanwhile, Alexander quietly noticed something else too. Clara constantly tried hiding the left side of her face while speaking, as if apologizing for existing visibly, and deep down, that broke his heart slightly, because Alexander built career designing beauty around impossible perfection. But standing before Clara now, he realized real beauty looked nothing like magazines. It looked like survival, like dignity after pain, like a woman still standing after life tried destroying her completely. Later that evening, during charity speech, unexpected microphone problems happened backstage. Panic spread quickly, staff became overwhelmed, and instantly, Clara rushed forward, helping calmly organize everything despite chaos, confident, professional, graceful under pressure. Meanwhile, Alexander watched her quietly from a distance, and slowly, something inside him shifted deeply, because suddenly, he no longer saw scars first. He saw strength, warmth, intelligence, and woman carrying sadness beautifully without bitterness. Before leaving that night, Alexander gently stopped Clara near the exit doors, then carefully handed her business card. Clara looked confused. "You need medical help?" Alexander softly laughed. "No." Long pause. "I think the world needs to see women like you differently." The sentence completely silenced Clara emotionally, because after months of feeling hidden, someone finally spoke like she deserved being seen again. Outside, cold night wind touched Clara's face softly as she stared at Alexander's card silently, and for the first time since losing Ethan, something unfamiliar returned quietly inside her chest: hope. After the charity gala, Clara expected never hearing from Alexander Reed again. Men like him belonged to another world: fashion magazines, luxury events, beautiful, perfect people, not women hiding scars beneath makeup every morning. So when Alexander personally called her 3 days later, Clara genuinely thought it was a mistake. "I want to meet again." Simple sentence, but her heart instantly became nervous. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander sat inside massive design studios staring at photographs from the charity gala. Not celebrity guests, not models, only Clara, helping patients, smiling gently at frightened burn survivors, and for the first time in years, fashion suddenly felt shallow to him, because deep down, he realized beauty industries spent decades teaching people to hide imperfections instead of teaching the world how to see humanity differently. One afternoon, Clara nervously arrived at Alexander's studio downtown. Huge glass building, elegant employees, walls covered with giant fashion portraits, perfect faces everywhere. Immediately, old insecurity returned, because suddenly, her scars felt painfully visible again. But moments later, Alexander walked toward her smiling warmly like nothing about her appearance required discomfort. And somehow, that alone relaxed her slightly. He offered coffee calmly, then without wasting time, he said something completely unexpected. "I want you to become the face of my new campaign." Clara nearly laughed from shock. Surely she misunderstood. "A campaign for what?" Alexander looked directly into her eyes. "Real beauty." Silence filled the office instantly, because suddenly, Clara felt both hope and terror simultaneously. "No." Immediate answer, panicked answer. "People don't want faces like mine on billboards." Alexander's expression softened, then quietly answered, "That's exactly why they need to." Those words emotionally shook Clara deeply, because after the accident, she spent months believing scars automatically removed beauty forever. And honestly, part of her still believed that lie. Meanwhile, Alexander continued gently. "You survived something horrific, but the saddest part is watching the world make survivors feel invisible afterward." Clara immediately looked away emotionally, because no one ever described her pain so accurately before. Long silence followed. Then, quietly, she whispered, "I don't even recognize myself anymore." Alexander slowly nodded. "That's because you're trying to compare yourself to who you were before pain." Pause. But survival changes people, and sometimes it creates stronger beauty instead of destroying it. For several seconds, Clara genuinely couldn't speak, because deep down, she realized something heartbreaking. Since the accident, everyone focused on fixing her face. Nobody focused on healing the way she saw herself. Weeks later, after endless hesitation, Clara finally agreed to the campaign, but only under one condition: no heavy editing. Alexander smiled immediately. "Exactly what I wanted." The photo shoot day terrified Clara completely. Bright studio lights, professional cameras, stylists everywhere, and giant mirrors reflecting scars she still struggled accepting. At first, she kept turning damaged side of her face away automatically. Old habit, shame habit. But Alexander quietly walked toward her gently, then softly whispered, "Stop hiding the part of you that survived." The sentence hit Clara like lightning emotionally, because suddenly she realized she spent months treating survival itself like something ugly. Slowly, for first time since the accident, Clara looked directly into camera without hiding. No shame, no apology, only honesty. And something incredible happened. The photographs became breathtaking, not because scars disappeared, because strength finally became visible. Weeks later, the campaign launched across the entire city. Massive billboards, magazine covers, social media everywhere. And one morning, Clara froze completely while driving toward work, because above crowded downtown streets, her own face looked down from a giant billboard, scars visible openly, eyes strong, beautiful without hiding. And beneath the photo, one sentence appeared: "Beauty did not leave her." Cars slowed nearby, staring upward, people taking photos, women crying in comment sections online, burn survivors posting emotional messages everywhere, and suddenly, Clara became a symbol of something much bigger than fashion: hope. Meanwhile, inside his office, Ethan saw the billboard accidentally through the window and instantly froze emotionally, because suddenly he realized something devastating. The woman he struggled looking at, the rest of the world now saw as extraordinary. Tears filled his eyes silently, not because Clara became famous, because another man helped her feel beautiful again, while he failed doing it when she needed him most now. Meanwhile, Clara stood beneath her own billboard staring upward through tears, and for the first time since the accident, she no longer saw victim when looking at herself. She saw survivor. After the campaign launched, Clara's life changed completely. Not overnight, but fast enough to feel unreal. Women from around the world began messaging her online: burn survivors, cancer patients, women hiding scars for years, all repeating the same emotional sentence: "Because of you, I stopped feeling ashamed." Meanwhile, fashion magazines suddenly called Clara the face of real beauty. Television interviews followed. Famous brands contacted Alexander constantly, and everywhere, people admired Clara, not despite her scars, but because she carried them without hiding anymore. For the first time since the accident, she walked through public spaces without lowering her head, not because staring disappeared, because shame finally did. Meanwhile, Ethan watched everything silently from distance. Every billboard felt like punishment now. Every interview reopened guilt, because suddenly, the woman he emotionally abandoned became stronger without him. And worst of all, another man helped rebuild the confidence Ethan destroyed. One evening, Ethan sat alone watching Clara's television interview. The host smiled warmly, asking, "What changed your life after the accident?" Clara became quiet for several seconds, then softly answered, "I stopped waiting for someone else to make me feel beautiful again." The sentence completely shattered Ethan emotionally, because deep down, he knew she was talking about him. Then Clara gently added, "Real love should help wounded people heal, not make them feel harder to love afterward." Ethan immediately turned the television off, unable to breathe properly, because finally he fully understood the damage he caused. Not the divorce, not the loneliness, the fact Clara questioned her worth during the moment she needed unconditional love most. Meanwhile, Alexander quietly remained beside Clara through everything: interviews, events, media pressure, and unlike Ethan after the accident, Alexander never looked uncomfortable beside her publicly, never asked photographers to edit scars away, never treated her beauty like tragedy. One afternoon, after major fashion conference downtown, Clara unexpectedly found Ethan waiting outside near her car. Older now, exhausted, regret visible permanently across his face. The moment he saw Clara walking confidently through cameras without hiding, his chest tightened painfully, because suddenly he remembered the terrified woman crying before mirrors months earlier and realized another man helped save the confidence he allowed to die. Clara stopped walking calmly, seeing him. No anger appeared in her eyes anymore, only distance. Long silence followed. Then Ethan softly whispered, "You look happy." Clara quietly answered, "I finally feel alive again." The sentence hurt Ethan more than insults could, because deep down, he understood she stopped feeling alive beside him long before leaving. Then, suddenly, through trembling voice, Ethan asked the question haunting him for months, "Do you still love me at all?" Silence filled the parking lot softly, because honestly, part of Clara probably always would. First love leaves scars too, but scars no longer controlled her life now. Finally, she answered honestly, "I loved you enough to survive your rejection." Ethan immediately lowered his eyes emotionally, because somehow that sounded more heartbreaking than hatred. Then, desperately, he stepped closer slightly. "I was weak." Real tears filled his eyes now. "I got scared after the accident, and instead of helping you heal, I emotionally abandoned you." Clara listened silently, because for first time, he finally spoke complete truth without excuses. Then Ethan whispered shakily, "I still love you." Long silence followed, and for one dangerous second, old memories almost returned. Morning kisses, road trips, the man she once trusted completely. But then, Clara remembered something too: crying alone in bathroom mirrors while her husband secretly searched comfort inside another woman. And suddenly, the past no longer felt safe enough to return to. Then, softly, with tears inside her own eyes, Clara whispered, "I loved you when life was beautiful." Pause. "But Alexander loved me after life changed me." Those words completely broke Ethan, because deep down, he knew they were true. Meanwhile, across the street nearby, Alexander quietly waited beside the car, giving Clara space respectfully, not jealous, not controlling, only trusting her completely. And seeing that, Ethan finally understood the difference between himself and the man standing beside Clara now. Alexander loved who Clara became after pain. Ethan only knew how to love who she used to be before it. Tears rolled down Ethan's face silently, because suddenly he realized something devastating. He lost the most important woman in his life the moment he made her feel difficult to love after surviving tragedy. Before leaving, Clara gently looked toward him one final time, then softly whispered, "I hope someday you learn how to stay beside people after life changes them." Moments later, she walked calmly towards Alexander, and without hesitation, Alexander gently kissed the scarred side of her face lovingly in front of everyone. No shame, no discomfort, only love. Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone watching the woman he once couldn't fully look at, finally being seen correctly by someone else. After Ethan tried winning Clara back, something inside him finally broke completely, because for the first time, he truly understood what he lost. Not only wife, not only marriage, but the woman who once trusted him enough to feel safe during her worst moment. Meanwhile, Clara's life continued changing rapidly. Magazine covers, television interviews, fashion campaigns across entire country. And strangely, the more visible her scars became publicly, the less power they held over her privately. Because now, people no longer saw tragedy first. They saw strength, confidence, survival. Meanwhile, Alexander stayed beside her quietly through everything, never controlling, never jealous, never asking Clara to become smaller so he could feel comfortable. Instead, he constantly encouraged her to shine brighter. One evening, during International Fashion Charity Gala in New York, Clara stood nervously backstage, preparing for live speech about burn survivors. Hundreds of celebrities attended, cameras everywhere, bright flashing lights. And despite new confidence, old fear suddenly returned again, because deep down, part of her still remembered hiding inside bathroom, crying after the accident. Suddenly, her hands began trembling slightly. Alexander immediately noticed. Without speaking, he gently walked toward her, then softly touched the scarred side of her face lovingly, not carefully, not fearfully, naturally, like touching beauty itself, and quietly whispered, "You don't need to hide anymore." The sentence instantly calmed her heart, because suddenly she realized something important. Real love never makes people feel difficult to look at. Moments later, Clara walked onto stage beneath massive applause. Elegant black dress, scars visible proudly beneath soft lights. And for several seconds, she simply stared at the audience, emotionally overwhelmed, then softly began speaking. "A year ago, I believed my life ended the night I lost my old face." The room became silent instantly because everyone felt real pain inside her voice. Clara continued calmly, but the hardest part wasn't the scars. Long pause. It was watching people change the way they looked at me afterward. Meanwhile, far away, Ethan watched the live broadcast alone inside his apartment, completely unable to move, because every word felt painfully personal. Then Clara softly added, "Trauma doesn't only test survivors, it tests the people claiming to love them too." Ethan immediately lowered his head, crying silently, because deep down, he failed that test completely. Meanwhile, inside the gala hall, Alexander watched Clara proudly with eyes full of admiration. Not pity, never pity, only love. After the speech ended, the entire audience stood applauding emotionally, some crying openly, others inspired silently. And suddenly, Clara no longer felt like a woman surviving tragedy. She felt powerful. Then, unexpectedly, a photographer shouted from the crowd, "Alexander, kiss her!" The audience laughed softly. Meanwhile, Clara instantly became nervous because deep down, part of her still feared public affection after the accident, feared hesitation, feared discomfort. But Alexander smiled gently. Then, without hesitation, he stepped toward Clara slowly, held her face carefully, and kissed the scarred side lovingly in front of every camera. No fear, no embarrassment, no hesitation, only complete acceptance. The room instantly exploded into applause. Meanwhile, Clara completely broke down crying against his chest emotionally, because suddenly, after months of feeling ruined, someone publicly loved the exact part of her she once believed destroyed her worth forever. And watching from television alone, Ethan finally understood the cruelest truth of all. Another man succeeded doing what he should have done from the beginning, make Clara feel beautiful after pain, instead of abandoned because of it. That night, social media exploded everywhere. Photos of the kiss spread globally. Millions of women reposted Clara's speech. Burn survivors thanked her publicly. And unexpectedly, Clara became symbol of something much bigger than beauty, proof that scars do not make people harder to love. Meanwhile, late that night, Alexander and Clara quietly stood together on a hotel balcony overlooking New York lights, cold wind moving softly around them. And for first time in a very long time, Clara no longer felt ashamed of her reflection inside glass windows nearby. Then softly, through an emotional smile, she whispered, "You kissed the part of me I thought everyone hated looking at." Alexander gently touched her face again, lovingly, then quietly answered, "That part survived hell." Pause. How could I not love it? After the gala in New York, Clara's life changed forever. Not because she became famous, because for the first time since the accident, she stopped seeing herself as broken. Meanwhile, women around the world continued sharing her speech everywhere online. Burn survivors, cancer patients, women carrying scars from violence, all repeating the same emotional sentence. "She helped me stop hiding." And slowly, Clara realized something powerful. Pain that once destroyed her confidence was now healing other people too. One morning, while walking through downtown Manhattan with Alexander, something unexpected happened. A little girl suddenly ran toward Clara excitedly. Her mother quickly followed, apologizing nervously. "I'm so sorry." But before she finished, the little girl softly smiled at Clara, then innocently whispered, "You look like superhero." Clara instantly froze emotionally, because once, children became frightened looking at her scars. Now, one small girl saw strength instead of fear. Alexander quietly watched tears fill Clara's eyes immediately, and without saying anything, he gently squeezed her hand supportively. Meanwhile, far across the city, Ethan's life quietly continued collapsing emotionally. Sophia disappeared completely long ago. Friends slowly stopped calling, work performance suffered, and every night he returned home to unbearable silence. But honestly, loneliness wasn't his biggest punishment anymore. Regret was, because now, everywhere he looked, the world admired the woman he emotionally failed. One rainy evening, Ethan accidentally passed giant billboard of Clara again downtown. Massive photograph glowing above city streets. Scars visible proudly, eyes strong, beautiful without apology. Cars slowing beneath it, women taking photos. And suddenly, Ethan pulled his car over emotionally, unable to drive further. Because deep down, he remembered something heartbreaking. After the accident, Clara once cried in front of mirror, asking him quietly, "Am I still beautiful to you?" And instead of healing her fear, he gave silence. That memory haunted him endlessly now. Meanwhile, Clara prepared for another huge moment in life. Alexander organized special fashion event featuring only survivors. No perfect models, no edited faces, only real people carrying visible pain proudly. And Clara became centerpiece of the entire campaign. The night of the event, hundreds filled the grand hall emotionally. Survivors everywhere, people in wheelchairs, women with scars, men missing limbs. And for first time in fashion history, imperfection became center of beauty itself. Backstage, Clara nervously stared at herself in mirror again. But this time, something was different. She no longer searched for old face, because finally she accepted the woman standing there now. Then quietly, she touched the scarred side of her face gently, not with sadness, with gratitude, because suddenly she realized those scars proved survival, not ugliness. Moments later, Alexander entered backstage, smiling warmly, then softly asked, "Ready?" Clara looked toward him emotionally, then whispered, "A year ago, I thought my life ended." Alexander gently kissed her forehead lovingly. "No." Soft smile, "It finally began." Those words settled deeply inside Clara's heart, because suddenly she understood something beautiful. Losing the old version of herself allowed stronger version finally appear. When Clara finally walked onto the runway, the audience immediately stood, applauding emotionally. No whispers, no pity, only admiration. Bright lights reflected softly across her scars as cameras flashed everywhere. And somehow, for the first time since the crash, Clara truly felt beautiful again. Not because scars disappeared, because shame finally did. Meanwhile, watching live stream alone late at night, Ethan quietly cried into his hands, because deep down, he finally understood the hardest lesson of his life. Real love is proven after beauty changes, not before it did. And he failed the woman who needed that love most. Months passed, and Clara became more than famous. She became a symbol of survival. Magazines called her the woman who changed beauty forever. Universities invited her to speak. Television programs discussed her story globally. And slowly, millions of people began seeing scars differently because of her. Meanwhile, Ethan lived quietly far away from that bright world now. No parties, no luxury events, no happiness inside the expensive apartment he once believed success would bring. Only silence, and regret growing heavier every single day. One evening, while scrolling online alone, Ethan suddenly froze. A new interview clip of Clara appeared everywhere. The interviewer softly asked her, "What hurt more, the accident or losing your marriage afterward?" The studio became silent instantly, and for several painful seconds, Clara didn't answer. Then softly whispered, "The accident damaged my face." Long pause. "But rejection damaged my soul." Ethan immediately felt unable to breathe, because finally he understood the full cruelty of what Clara carried silently all those months. Not only physical pain, emotional abandonment from the person supposed to protect her most. That night, Ethan broke down completely. Not quiet tears anymore, real, uncontrollable grief. Because suddenly, he no longer cried over losing Clara. He cried realizing he became source of her deepest insecurity during her most vulnerable moment. Meanwhile, Clara prepared for biggest event of her career, international live television interview in Los Angeles. Millions expected watching. Survivors everywhere admired her, and Alexander proudly stayed beside her through every moment. Before the interview started, he gently fixed Clara's dress strap, smiling softly, then whispered, "You already changed more lives than you realize." Clara smiled emotionally, because now love beside her no longer felt conditional. No fear existed inside it, no shame, only safety. The interview began live worldwide, bright cameras, huge audience, and halfway through discussion, the host suddenly surprised Clara completely. "We have someone who asked to speak to you tonight." Clara looked confused instantly. Then, slowly, Ethan walked onto the stage. The entire audience gasped. Meanwhile, Clara completely froze emotionally, because she never expected seeing him there publicly. Ethan looked different now, older, broken somehow, eyes carrying permanent regret. For several seconds, he simply stood there, unable to speak, millions watching live. And finally, through trembling voice, he whispered, "I spent months trying to understand why I failed you." Clara's eyes immediately filled with tears, because deep down, part of her always needed hearing him finally say it honestly. Ethan continued shakily, "When your face changed, I became afraid." Audience silent completely now, not one sound. Then Ethan looked directly toward Clara, emotionally destroyed. "But instead of helping you feel loved, I made you feel harder to love." Tears rolled down Clara's face silently, because finally, after all this time, he truly understood. Meanwhile, Alexander quietly watched from the audience nearby. No jealousy, only respect for painful truth finally being spoken. Then, suddenly, Ethan's voice completely broke. "I looked away when you needed someone to hold your face and tell you nothing about your worth changed." The audience began crying openly now, because everyone understood something devastating. The deepest wounds are often created by people we trust most. Ethan wiped tears weakly, then softly whispered, "I'm sorry for every mirror you cried in because of me." Clara immediately covered her mouth emotionally, because suddenly all those lonely bathroom nights returned vividly, and hearing him acknowledge them finally healed something buried deeply inside her. Then Ethan slowly lowered his head completely, in front of millions, no pride left anymore, only remorse. "I loved you before the scars, but Alexander loved you through them." Long, painful silence followed. Then Ethan quietly added the sentence, completely breaking the audience emotionally. "And that's how I learned what real love was, too late." Meanwhile, Clara cried silently watching him, not from wanting him back, but because genuine accountability sounds heartbreaking when it finally arrives honestly. Then, slowly, she stood up from her chair, walked toward Ethan calmly, and for one emotional moment, the entire world watched silently. Finally, Clara softly touched his trembling hands, then whispered gently, "I forgive you." Ethan immediately broke down, crying harder, because suddenly the woman he hurt most still chose peace instead of revenge. But then Clara quietly continued, "Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it lets people stop drowning inside it." Those words settled across the entire silent studio emotionally. And somewhere in that moment, both became free from the tragedy that destroyed their marriage. Not together again, but healed enough to stop carrying hatred forever. After the live interview, the entire world talked about Clara and Ethan for weeks. Clips of the apology spread everywhere online. Millions watched the moment Ethan admitted his failure publicly. And strangely, people didn't hate him afterward, because his pain looked real, his regret looked honest. Meanwhile, Clara finally felt something unexpected too: peace. Not because the scars disappeared, not because the past stopped hurting completely, but because the truth no longer remained hidden between them. Ethan finally admitted what destroyed their marriage: fear, weakness, failure to love someone correctly after tragedy changed them. And somehow, hearing those truths aloud released years of buried pain inside Clara's heart. One evening, after another successful fashion event, Clara quietly stood alone inside her apartment bathroom, staring into the mirror. Same scars, same damaged skin, same face she once cried over endlessly. But this time, something felt completely different. She no longer searched for the woman she used to be before the accident, because finally, she loved the woman who survived it instead. Meanwhile, Alexander quietly appeared behind her near a doorway, watching her reflection softly, then smiling gently. "What are you thinking about?" Clara touched the scarred side of her face calmly, then whispered emotionally, "For months, I thought this face destroyed my life." Long silence followed. Then softly, with tears inside her eyes, she added, "But maybe it revealed who truly loved me." Alexander slowly walked closer, then gently wrapped his arms around her from behind. No hesitation, no discomfort, only complete love. And staring at both reflections together inside the mirror, Clara suddenly realized something beautiful. She no longer hated her reflection anymore. That alone felt miraculous. Months later, Alexander organized the largest fashion show of his entire career. But this time, the event wasn't about luxury or perfect beauty. It became a celebration of survival. Models with scars, wheelchairs, physical disabilities, women once told they were ruined. And Clara opened the entire show. When she stepped onto the runway, thousands stood applauding instantly. Bright lights reflected softly across her scars, proudly visible, without makeup hiding them. And for first time in her life, Clara didn't walk like woman seeking acceptance anymore. She walked like someone who already accepted herself fully. Meanwhile, watching from backstage quietly, Alexander's eyes filled with emotion, because deep down, he knew something important. He didn't save Clara. She saved herself. He simply loved her while she learned how. After the show ended, journalists surrounded Clara excitedly, questions everywhere, cameras flashing constantly. Then one reporter suddenly asked, "If you could speak to the woman you were right after the accident, what would you tell her?" The room instantly became silent. Clara thought quietly for several seconds, then softly answered, "I would tell her this." Long pause. The scars are not the reason people fail to love you correctly. Tears filled audience eyes immediately. Then Clara smiled gently. Scars only revealed who was capable of real love. The sentence spread globally afterward, quoted everywhere, and unexpectedly became a symbol of healing for millions carrying invisible pain too. Meanwhile, far away, Ethan watched the interview quietly from small apartment alone. But this time, his tears felt different, not desperate, not selfish, only acceptance. Because finally, he understood Clara truly found happiness without him, and honestly, she deserved it. One rainy evening months later, Ethan accidentally crossed paths with Clara again near a quiet bookstore downtown. No cameras, no interviews, only two people once deeply connected by love and tragedy. For several seconds, they simply smiled softly at each other. No bitterness remained now, only history. Then Ethan quietly whispered, "You look beautiful." And for first time since the accident, those words no longer felt painful coming from him, because Clara no longer needed his validation to believe them. She already knew. Then, softly, she smiled warmly. "Thank you." Moments later, Alexander arrived nearby carrying coffee, smiling toward Clara immediately. Natural love, peaceful love. And while watching them together, Ethan finally understood the final lesson life painfully taught him. Real love is not tested when everything is perfect. It is tested when life changes someone completely, and you choose whether to stay beside them or slowly look away. Clara gently held Alexander's hand afterward, then walked forward confidently beneath soft city rain. No longer hiding scars, no longer mourning old beauty, because finally, the woman once abandoned for changing became someone powerful enough to teach the world what beauty truly meant. Some people only love others when life is easy, but real love begins after pain changes everything. Because scars do not destroy beauty. Cruelness does. Abandonment does. Failure to love someone during their darkest moment does. And sometimes, the people who reject us after tragedy only push us toward the ones finally capable of loving us correctly. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, because some stories are not only emotional, they remind us that real beauty begins the moment we stop apologizing for surviving.